Profitability is king. You're going to hear a lot of people talk about revenue. To me, that's really a vanity metric. You can't buy groceries with revenue. If you think of selling on Amazon as a chess game, the chess game is getting harder.
All right, folks, welcome back again to the High Voltage Business Builders podcast. If you want to know about the end-to-end profitability and growth of a sale on Amazon, we're going to cover that today. So if you are in the world of Amazon, FBA, e-commerce, probably business in general, then this is the conversation you guys want to pay attention to today. It is always important to understand the profitability and numbers in a business. Do not run your business by gut feel or you will crash it into the ground. So if you're interested in learning how to run by the numbers, that's what we're going to talk about today. So I'll welcome David to the call. Thanks for coming on, dude.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Neil, thanks for having me. Looking forward to our conversation.
Awesome, man. So let's kick this off with something. Give us some wisdom right out of the gate. What should we know about in your world? What do you want us to know about today?
I would say profitability is king. You're going to hear a lot of people talk about revenue. To me, that's really a vanity metric. You can't necessarily buy groceries with revenue. You can with net profit. And so that's
Great.
something that I'm obsessive about in my own business and hope to touch on a couple nuggets that should be helpful to your listeners.
All right. So those who are wanting to understand what profit actually means, define it in your language. Obviously, there's the Webster's dictionary version. And some people understand what profit means, I think, to some degree. But let's just define it to make sure we're on the same page.
Absolutely. So revenue minus expenses equals income. And so this is on Amazon in particular, getting revenue is not very challenging. Getting profitable sales is challenging. And so another way to look at it would be, this gets into cash versus accrual basis, but your cash inflows minus your cash outflows, and looking at the difference between those two numbers. And that's essentially what the business owner takes home or has left over to reinvest in the business.
So define cash and accrual, since you brought it up, so we can keep on everybody on the same page.
Absolutely. So cash basis accounting would be simply looking at your bank statements at the end of every month and seeing what are your cash inflows and outflows. Accrual basis accounting is, and one of the biggest differences is when you would put inventory on your balance sheet. So if I buy $1,000 worth of inventory this month and I sell $500 worth of it, I have a $500 expense on my income statement, a $500 asset on my balance sheet. If you were to look at cash basis, that would be a $1,000 expense and nothing on your balance sheet. And so I would say to your listeners that are getting bank reconciled financial statements, accrual basis accounting is, I think, the most decision useful. And you'll notice I said bank reconciled financial statements. That's something that I think is critically important. And that reconciling back to your bank statement allows you to know that all of the cash inflows and outflows in your business are accounted for.
Yeah, everything is tracked at the detail level. How many businesses in Amazon do you think run cash versus accrual, and what is your insight into that?
You know, it's interesting if you think of selling on Amazon as a chess game, the chess game is getting harder. And I like that. I really do like that. I think it weeds out a lot of the newbies or people that are just kicking the tires, and it makes it a more professional setting. And ultimately, I do think that Amazon customers benefit from that. So I don't have a great stat on that, but I would tell you that nearly all serious business owners that I know get their financial statements done on an accrual basis.
Yeah, we also run bookkeepers and third-party accounting, which I know a lot of Amazon sellers don't seem to see the importance of doing that. They think just basic, QuickBooks with a little bit of auditing is going to help them understand what their business is actually doing. And I find more often than not, they don't understand their financial IQ is pretty low, actually, when it comes to running the business. They think they're just running a channel. And that's probably one of the biggest things I want to add to this topic today. And you're headed down that path as we continue this conversation. That is making sure people are actually running this as a business, not a channel. Would you agree with that, or would you argue differences in that?
No, absolutely. Running it as a business is critically important. And, as it relates to financial statements, that is, as a business owner, that's your report card. That if you want a 4.0, right, you've got to have a great income statement. And that means spending time on it every month, looking and making decisions based off of it.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be that time consuming if you get support and help. And if you're treating it like a real business, you should upfront know to put these things sort of in place. And if you don't know them, then you have to invest in the knowing. So for those of you listening today, this may be your time to invest in knowing as David continues to unpack this. So let's get back to some of the fundamentals of what profit means in the business, because someone might say, well, I make profit flipping products. I make profit at 7%. What do you say the numbers are for you that you would want to see somebody, who's listening to this be able to tackle both revenue generation and profitability on a, highly competitive, challenging, what we call a professional selling platform now on Amazon?
Absolutely. I think it starts with when you're launching products, looking at what is your input costs and what are you going to be able to sell it for. Let's take a product, for instance, that has a landed cost of $10, meaning say you pay your supplier $7 and you have $3 per unit in shipping. I'm going to want to make sure that I can sell that product for at least $40. And people may look at that and say that's crazy high margins. Well, not really. I think it's actually necessary to be at a minimum of 4x when looking at your landed costs. And the reason for that is you're going to get hit with a ton of fees as an Amazon seller. For instance, you're going to get hit with FBA fees. You're going to get hit with referral fees. I generally, when I look at my businesses, I generally figure that Amazon takes approximately 45 to 50%. And in that, I think that's kind of industry norm. That's across 4 portfolio companies of ours. And so when I'm looking at launching a product, I really like to back into what would be a 30% profit margin. And that would be before PPC spend. And the reason for that in TACOS, total advertising cost of sale,
Advertising cost stuff. Yeah.
there we go, it is a metric that I pay very close attention to. So let's define that. If you sell a product for $100 and it takes $10 of PPC spend to make that sale, you have a 10% TACOS, or total advertising cost of sale. And that's something that, in my opinion, Amazon is a pay-to-play marketplace. PPC is part of the game. I know very few companies that sell completely organic. And so taking a look at that is critically important.
Yeah,
And
we shoot
so,
for the obvious management of organic as much as we can get. Some of our highest accounts are like 90% organic, which is amazing when you get through, because that's how we spend a lot of time defining the metrics, the numbers, the retail price point, the kinds of products, and of course, the value of the brand and elevating the value of the brand so that that is something that is in demand and it's accomplishable. We spend a lot of time doing that, a lot more than most people are willing to do, I think, in terms of dialing in. But you were going to continue on with the PPC side, I'm sure, because that's an important part of that acquisition strategy.
at the beginning of this episode, I had mentioned that revenue on Amazon generally is easy to come by. What do I mean by that? It means that if you spend enough on PPC, you will make sales. Amazon will make sure of that. However, they may not be profitable sales. And that's where this TACOS metric, I think, is critically important. Across our brands right now, we're running at between 12 and 15%. And that number 2 years ago would have been between 8 and 10%. And what we've seen is a shift from, say 70% organic sales to approximately 50-50 organic to PPC ratio. And that shift is increased TACOS, which further supports the need to have products that are very profitable on the front end, that you can source land on US soil or whatever marketplace you're selling in for a minimum of 4x of what you plan on selling it.
Yeah, these are good numbers, and actually they're extremely in line with where we are. Our tacos, typically we want to generate between 8 to 15% on our tacos. It's the number we watch the most of anything. We sell products $50 to $200 in retail price point to ensure the gross margins and profitability after 30 to 40% before PPC are where we target. And then, of course, getting PPC dialed in after organic is something we spend a long time doing. We'll spend 30 to 60 to 90 days just dialing in organic before we launch PPC ads. If it doesn't respond what we want to see in the first 7 days in the numbers, then we know we've got something wrong. It's actually a very fast engine of determining data. Most people think it's extremely slow, but if you don't know what you're looking for, then you're not going to see the data. You're going to be waiting for data you don't understand. And as I mentioned earlier, invest in the knowing, because it has a lot of upside potential if you do it correctly and can go relatively fast, especially on the acquisition side. But yeah, we see the same effect overarching. due to Amazon basically becoming an advertising engine, which you may have heard too, that, by 2026, they are going to become the most profitable division, Amazon advertising, above their warehouse services, AWS. So they are turning into a media engine, which means we need to do what, David?
Hey, we need to run PPC.
You got to be a media marketing expert now on Amazon, which means you got to run this at a professional level. So not only do you have to know the fundamentals of the business and the understanding of a full e-commerce company, treat Amazon like a professional seller, which means actually know how to not just generate revenue, but profit. And then, of course, how to acquire and become a media buyer and do that in such a way where it becomes advantageous to your business, not so many people see it as a liability. I can only, go at 30% ACOS. Well, I'll run 80, 90% ACOS if my TACOS stays within my range. And I think that's an important factor for me that, I don't know if you echo that. It sounds like you do, but for acquisition costs, it's important you are able to acquire that customer. As you had said before, and I would 100% agree, and let's unpack this just a little bit for those who are listening, we will go after products in that 50 to 200. I didn't say I wouldn't sell products less than 50. It's just when we will do it now. We used to be able to lead with products $20, $30, and $40 on first sale acquisition, but now we've discovered it's much easier and there's faster profitability for growth if we go in and attach ourselves to higher end products first. And then when you build that brand out, you can come backwards into gear, accessories, and other ancillary products that fulfill out the brand at lower margins that drive higher volume, right? So they may drive more units, but they're also grabbing more market share. They're usually easier to acquire more people. And then, of course, it brings the brand more holistically as people see you more and more everywhere else. And then we have our higher products. Is that a strategy that resonates with you at all or in what you guys are doing?
Absolutely. And I fully agree with that. And as we mapped out 2024 and beyond, we're targeting products over $100. And in oversized, I see there being really big opportunities in oversized. Things that are honestly a pain to move, heavy things that people are unwilling to deal with. I've got a buddy that sells snowplows, big 2,000-pound snowplows, and he does great. And it's because they are an absolute pain to move. However, he has this market cornered and is doing really well. One thing if you look at market saturation, and you look at a lot of gurus that sell courses, what they'll tell you is to find a product on Alibaba that's under $20, sells for under $20 and fits in a backpack. And if you look at the number of sellers that are focusing on those products, it's very, very competitive. My first brand was a product that was under $20 and fit in a backpack. And that is a really challenging spot to be in. And when you are bidding on keywords, there's really not a lot of meat on the bone to convert a sale. And so what we've been looking at is higher priced products and oversized products.
Yeah, and I actually had a guy come in yesterday who has one of those, and I was talking to him about the market share, and I'm like, look, if you are going to sell a $1,980, $1,997 product, which you can do on Amazon for the kind of products and base he was in, know that even if you're tackling 5 to 10 units a day of that in the industry that you're in, that might not be your hero product, but you can definitely do 5 to 10 sales a day at that price point on Amazon. It's going to create an amazing revenue stream of profitability based on, $500 in net profit per unit after all fees and, everything stacked on top of it. But you also know all the other things that people are going to buy who can spend $2,000 on that product. If they're going to buy that at $2,000, don't you think they're willing to spend the extra $200, $300, $400 to get the accessories and gears to support it, which you can also sell them? And It's like, his brain kind of went through it because he had spent 6 years developing this product, got the patents and everything done on the product, but hasn't actually been selling it yet. And I'm like, man, we got this thing. We got to flip this thing around. We got to go the other direction. You got to get this thing selling, even at 5 units a day, right? 5 units a day, $500 in profit. Who wouldn't turn that down, right? So the next step is I need you to think like a brand owner. I need you to start thinking about what is all the other things that someone would come into my shop and want to purchase if they just spent $2,000 with me and then turn right around and sell them $300 to $500 more. And for whatever reason, he'd never heard that, thought about it, or just didn't cross his mind, or maybe he just didn't know he had permission to do it. I don't know what it was. But all of a sudden his brain was just like, now I got to start thinking like a brand. I'm like, yeah, you got to start thinking like a brand. You can't start thinking about a single unit. And I see this in the course and program and Huru things, Hopia mindset mentalities, stuff that was 7 years ago about flipping products under $20. And I still see people talking about that, which is a great barrier of slow entry if you're going to get in on the small side and you just want to kind of, get in and kick the waters and maybe do this as, on your own. But you're going to have to very quickly transition to somebody who thinks about this like a business, or you're simply going to be driving a lot of revenue for Amazon and third party, manufacturers and nothing for yourself.
Absolutely. And you see too many sellers that do that, that have
Yeah.
great revenue. They'll post their screenshots of their revenue on
Right.
Facebook pages, which gives them a nice ego boost. But at the end of the day, they're not profitable.
Yeah.
And what I like to do is when I'm mapping out my next year. So for instance, we're going through 2025 planning, is I will set a target for where I want to be, say EBITDA or seller's discretionary earnings, but I will set a target on what I want my take home pay to be, what I want to reinvest back in the business, and I will work backwards from that. And there are products, and I will also add, a lot of people get into Amazon selling as a side hustle because they want to quit their job. And they
Right.
have an idea in their mind of, well, I need $100,000 a year to be able to quit my job. Well,
Right.
some products, if you get 100% market share, you will not earn that. And that's an important thing to know,
That is true.
is starting with your end goal and working backwards. And going back to your example of 5 units a day at $500 profit, that is in line. Like that is a type of product that you could snowball into meeting your $100,000 take home pay. And so I think that's a critically important point, is starting with the end goal and working backwards, especially on product launches. I Failing on paper is something that I have had to learn the hard way over and over and over again. I've had a lot of duds on product launches. I think
Well,
I've
who hasn't? That's just part of the process of failing up. I think everybody thinks that there's some miraculous perfect process. I have a green light process of numbers and profitability, but there's no guarantee with even 80% of the data, competition, keyword, and validation that in that 20% when you launch it, it's in your market, your validation, you optimized it correctly, and you're actually speaking to the audience, right? Those are all things that have to get figured out, right? I mean, you got to fail up.
Absolutely. And that's something I don't think people talk about enough. Across 4 portfolio companies, we have around 2,200 listings. And if I look at ones that are just absolutely crushing it,
Yeah.
it's about 10 to 15% of those. There's
All right.
probably another 30% that do okay, but the bottom half are duds. And those are usually products that we're retiring and killing off, which is a whole separate topic. It's kind of painful, right? Killing off
Yeah,
your
but you got to look at the bottom line. If you're going to play the numbers and you're going to be a business owner, then you have to sometimes look at, as Go to Great says, you got to sometimes look at the rock and look at the ugly things under it and cut it off. But if you cut those bottom lines out of your seller account, your seller performance is going to go up, right? You know that. So
Absolutely.
those are dead weight dragging down your entire performance account. Even if you got all green lights, but you've got 5 or 10 SKUs setting below a certain line of sales and volume, and you remove them from your account, the entire account's going to get a boost. So it's actually a good optimization. It's hard to accept, but there's a good optimization that actually occurs within your account. It'll happen within the first 30 days after those are removed from the system. Your entire seller health account will actually get a boost in rankings.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so I think a lot of people come to Amazon, they'll launch 1 or 2 products, those
Yep.
won't pan out, and then they'll say, I'm going to move on to some other multi-level marketing scheme, or
The failure.
or
The
I'm
whole
going
thing's
into
a failure.
real estate. It's just kind of a stop along the way of the
Yeah.
like entrepreneur slash ADHD path. And that's really, really interesting, because I think those people aren't sticking around long enough to
They
see.
are not giving it enough time to mature in
Mhm.
the system. It's kind of like, well, I want to be a professional tennis player, but I played 2 matches and I won one and lost one. So I think I'm probably going to give up.
Yeah,
It's perseverance and tenacity in any market. And as it becomes more challenging, which it has in the 12 years I've been doing it, it is going to get more professional. It is going to get more advanced. And I think I'm excited too. Like you said earlier, the opportunity is only growing in my mind. It's growing in my mind because those who are willing to play the game and look at the barrier of entries and get into the barrier of entries at different risk levels are going to obviously have the higher reward levels, which is at the level we're playing at. It's not your what I call Amazon's mosh pit, which I like to joke about, right? Is where everybody's at the sub $30 product fighting around in a mosh pit, banging into each other and with sweaty biker guys, which we know is the Korean mafia in Texas and the Chinese hackers and, and everywhere else that come in and want to steal all your goodies. Even Amazon's going to try to compete with most of you at the Temu level here shortly, just to see how that pans out, which I think will probably flop, quite honestly. With certain changes in the marketplace, they're going to throw that little Temu style thing into the Amazon space. I don't even know what they're calling it yet, but it's supposed to be, lower priced products moving at faster volumes from China. So we'll see how that pans out. Quite honestly, I see it as an opportunity for people in America to go, yeah, you know what? If I wanted Timo, I would have gone to Timo. I went to Amazon because it's not Timo, it's not Shine, it's not that. We have a sophisticated buyer group that's also changing. Talk to me about that from your experience, because I see that changing dramatically in the last 3 to 5 years.
On the acquisition side or on the customer
Just
side?
the sophistication of the buyers, the sophistication of their research, their conversations, what they consider good and bad products. The buyer itself has changed quite a bit.
Absolutely. I think I have always felt that e-commerce is a better shopping experience. When I'm standing at, say, Macy's at the mall, and I'm on that big marble staircase, I know that in 10 years, that will be an apartment. That'll be a penthouse apartment because, and we're seeing this, because e-commerce is a better shopping experience. For instance, I'm talking into a microphone right now. If I go to Best Buy and I ask the salesperson, tell me about this microphone, odds are they haven't used it. Odds are they probably don't know much about it. However, if you go to Amazon, you can read thousands of reviews of people that bought this exact make and model. You can filter on what people liked. You can filter on what people didn't like. You can come up with common keywords. And so I think people are starting to appreciate that.
Well, now they even have Rufus, right? Which is going to give you a summary and some bullet points for you to give a high level view real quick of what people like and do not like in the system, which is changing is pretty fast as well as they roll that out further.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think people are really starting to find the value in e-commerce. It's always been there, but people are really unlocking it. If you put yourself in the shoes of a buyer, the risk that they have is making the wrong decision, buying the wrong thing. And information reduces that risk. Okay.
Yeah.
The review system is huge. Talking to a salesperson that has no idea about this microphone does not reduce your risk. You're still holding the same amount of risk as you did walked into that store.
That's true.
And so it's providing people with a better shopping experience. And I think the products, the Me Too products, the kind of just junk, people that are selling junk, it's going to be a tough next couple years for you. People want nice products. I think that's something that's overlooked. Sell nice things. And, people get really caught up. And I know I do sometimes get caught up in tacos, ACOS, all the different like intricate strategies. However, if you have a nice product, a really nice product that people really like, that people show their friends because it's just awesome, that will win. I've got a belt. I have no affiliation with this company, but it's called Anson Belts. It is the best belt I've ever had. It's on a click ratchet system. And honestly, any opportunity I have to tell people about it, I do. Because it's a great product. That company could underperform on PPC. They could underperform in a lot of areas of their business, but where they crush it is having an awesome product that has good intellectual property around it. And as a result, I think that company is crushing it because they have that strategic advantage. And so people want to get into selling, but I would not skip over some critically important steps in your product development.
Yeah, it's important to get into there. And it's also important to understand it in the product development cycle that actually allows that to occur. What I want people to understand, and I think you know this, and I want to drive this back out and double click on it for a second. And that is what we are actually doing as business owners who run e-commerce companies whose first sales channel is Amazon FBA to capture the demand of an existing product in the marketplace. What we're trying to do is put our hat in the ring against an AI system, against other direct marketing and competition for brands and the value and perception of that brand, the emotional appeal, the connectivity, and the solution-driven nature of that particular product, and simply present a better value statement to that customer that answers questions faster and easier and more powerful in their mind. We haven't even sold them the product yet. I think so many people get caught up in product development and R&D and think I need to build this best new mousetrap, this best, greatest widget. If I don't pull an Elon Musk, this thing is never going to sell and make money, right? How many people sell snowplows? How many people sell blankets? How many people sell, mattresses, right? The end result is there are 15 burger joint brands and there are 20 pizza joint brands. So why are there so many brands?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point and definitely noted on that. I will say, sticking with the pizza joint example, the number one pizza shop in town, they have much better P&L than the worst pizza shop in town, right? Because they have the better pizza. And so I do think focusing on product development is huge. And
When you focus on it.
when you focus on it,
That's kind of where
absolutely.
I'm getting down to, right?
Absolutely.
When you
Yes.
focus on it is more important than focusing on it. Of course, we have to get good reviews and we want to create a great product. I'm going to make a logical assumption, but state it out here for those who are paying attention. We have to create a good product. Make no mistake. Some people hear me and are like, what? He said we don't need a good product. No, that's not what I said. You got to close the loop on a good product. It's just when you close the loop on a good product is very important. If you know your numbers first, you know your marketplace, you know your competition, build your listings, build your imagery, build your brand correctly, and then make sure you back up that transaction with a product that meets the expectation. But I think people get this in reverse a lot, way too much. I think it's talked about way too much. Product, 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 product. And while I understand that, I think people got it backwards.
I agree. And I do think, I'm sitting here looking at a product across the room from me, and we've done 2 rounds of samples, and it's time to launch. We probably have 95% of the bugs worked out, and we're gonna work out the last 5% of the bugs on our second order. And it's just because we need to get that product to market.
Yep.
We've got a solid product. It doesn't hit every single bullet point that we want, and we're gonna continue to work with our manufacturer on that, but at the end of the day, you do need to get into the game. And I would agree with your point on closing the loop knowing when to close the loop, launch it. And, I will also share with you in terms of customer feedback, there are a lot of times out of your first 100 reviews, there will be feedback that you did not anticipate or did not think
Oh,
about.
almost always there will be. That's just it, right? So once I'm selling and I understand what the data is and what my market is doing, my share, my marketplace, if you will, for my listing in my brand, in my seller account, I'm now going to get feedback that helps me define how close am I to my target audience. Negative
Absolutely.
feedback is not necessarily bad feedback if it's relative to something you can fix on the product.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so when you're placing your second, third, fourth order, that's where you take that feedback and
Dial it in.
you plug it in.
Yeah, you
And
dial it in. Once you know you can sell it, you dial in the product, you make the transaction smoother, and it will simply get better and go longer. Again, I think I see and this guy yesterday, I had great empathy with him because I've gone through this process in the past and spent way too much money, spending too long R&Ding a product before ever getting it to market. And by that point, you're tired, you're burnt out, you don't want to hear about it anymore, and all you want to do is get the thing selling. If we can inverse that relationship, what I say is sales fixes everything, and prove I can sell the product and start meeting the market demand, then I can start focusing on, okay, what am I missing? How should I change the product? What can create innovation of the product? And how can I move it to market? I think that's just a simple thing that I want to repeat here because I keep repeating it over and over and over again because I hear so many people just like, well, grab this product and just see if it sticks against the wall. That's not exactly what I'm talking about. You've got to know your numbers. You need to take it and run with it as though it's going to be the best product you've ever had, which means you've got to put the work into it, know the numbers, understand your profitability and your market competition and where you're going, and then redefine, as you just said, on the next 1,000 units or the next growth of that product, change and innovate the product to dial it in with the market to increase its value. And you've basically solved both of the major equations to take revenue and turn it into profit. And of course, turn it into good reviews. The third component of that, and close the cycle on that engine, which is, a good product transaction leads to a good review. And this is the economic engine of any e-commerce company, really, at the end of the day.
absolutely, absolutely. One thing that we've brought up quite a bit is knowing your numbers. And I've got a
Mm,
pro tip for your listeners that we've started doing this year on product launches and just on overall operations that I think has been critically important. It's the introduction of a topic that we call AFCoS, which is Amazon fee cost of sale.
okay.
I have not read this. This is kind of an internal naming convention, but one thing that's unique about Amazon businesses is, in a typical business, you are writing a check or swiping a credit card for all
Hmm.
of your expenses. That is not the case with an Amazon business. There are a lot of expenses that are just deducted out of your seller payout.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a report called the Amazon DRSR report. And that's going to give you a breakdown of your inventory overages, long-term storage fees. There's starting to levy penalties on return rates.
Our rates.
There's a bunch of people will be shocked. I was shocked when I looked in my Amazon DRSR report on how much I was getting nickeled and dimed. And what we've started doing is pulling those out and setting them aside separately on our financial statements and calling that AFCoS. And what we found across four portfolio companies is our average AFCoS is between 5 and 8%. And that's huge. That's
actually quite a bit.
huge. If you think about the amount of effort it would take on advertising to take your tacos from 20 to 12 and the impact that would have on your sales, or taking an AFCoS down from 20 to 12, or down into an average, that's huge. It is a much easier step to take to manage this AFCoS. And I always say what gets measured gets managed. And this is
money. At the
it
end of the
is.
day.
It is.
Yeah.
And so we've started looking at this and monitoring it. And I look at this on a weekly basis. It's something that we manage. And when I'm launching a product, I know what my FBA fee is. I know what my referral fee is. I usually use like a 15% tacos, but I've started using AFCoS as an additional expense because guess what? It will show up. It will be there. And once Amazon starts levying a fee, it typically doesn't go away. Inventory overages were introduced back during COVID. Those have never gone away. And they just continuously add these fees in. And I think that that's something that, because you're not writing a check for it, it doesn't sting as bad, but it should. You're writing an invisible check for those every 2 weeks, and you need to know what you're writing that check for.
Fantastic. Folks, definitely go check out that report, the DRSR report. It will get you those details. You might have to go through with a fine-tooth comb if necessary, get a bookkeeper, or go talk to David and his team about helping you guys get through that process, because that may be found money. What would you say on average people are missing in theirs? What would you say they're, like, let me ask another question in another way. The AFCoS that you're talking about and the average of sellers, what would you think that they're going to normally see in their accounts?
I think between 5 and 8%.
And for their accounts too, on average? Okay.
Well, no. I would say probably 12 to 15%. And I think if you manage it, you can get it down to 5 to 8. It's something that I like. Long-term storage fees is one, especially if you have a high SKU brand. Those are always sneaking up on you. And so, yeah, I think it is something that you can manage down to the 5 to 8% range. But I think people would be shocked to see where they're at.
Yeah.
And we spend a tremendous amount of time looking at PPC and PPC metrics. This is just as important. And the check that you're writing for AFCoS is about the same amount as you're writing for advertising. It's just, it's talked about as much.
It's just hidden because you're not actually pushing the buttons. Amazon is. So maybe we're just paying attention, not paying attention. Well, you can't be in ignorance today, folks, because now you know. So you got something to do today. That's an actual amazing pro tip. Thank you for that. Folks, if you're listening to this, you should go pull those reports today and start looking at them, going over it. If you've got your bookkeeper or your CPA already in line, have them go through the line items with you, have them start poking in and finding out what you can get, find out what your AF cost is, AFCoS. And if not, hit up David, have him and his team go through and help you guys out. That'd be important. We're going to go help you, or we're going to connect with you if they need to go get that information.
Absolutely. Best way to reach me is david@firingtheman.com, FIRINGTHEMAN.com.
Firing the Man.
That's right.
Love that.
Thank you.
How long ago did you do that?
So, little backstory on this. Back in 2017, I had a goal that I wanted to quit my job and do e-commerce full time. I was working in a consulting company and had a good job, but that entrepreneurial itch was starting to itch really, really bad. And I had to scratch it. And met my business partner, Ken Wilson. He was working as an engineer at that time. And we set a goal of firing the man, of building up our side hustles to the point where we could quit our jobs, or fire the man, as we like to say. And we started that podcast 5 years ago. 1 year let's see, 6 months into starting that show, Ken fired the man. And 14 months into starting the show, I fired the man. And so we're in our 5th year of the podcast. We've documented our journey ever since the beginning. And it was interesting having a great job and then having a podcast about quitting your job. I kind of felt like I was answering to two masters, but ultimately my goal was to quit my job, fire the man. And in order to hold myself accountable, I started a podcast and announced it to the universe. This is what I want to do, and I'm going to do it. And so, yeah, Firing the Man podcast. Check it out.
Love it. Well, I had the honor of being on there, so I think our episode's coming out soon.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that was a really good podcast. Ken and I talked about that after we recorded, and yeah, outstanding podcast. And yeah, if you're looking for a good starter episode and you're already a fan of Neil, go check that out.
Well, thank you.
That should be publishing in October of 24.
Awesome. Well, look, man, this has been a great conversation. You've gave us some serious details, pro tips, information, anything that I didn't bring up in the last 35 minutes that you want to chat about real quick that maybe I didn't catch. And
I would just, to any of your listeners that are on the fence about getting into this, do it. Just get into it. You're going to have some failures. That's okay. This is a better shopping experience. If this is a baseball game, we're probably in the 3rd or 4th inning. Mm-hmm. When you look at drone delivery, when you look at the future of e-commerce, it's super exciting, a lot more exciting than brick and mortar. And it's something that you can do remotely. And it's just, I love e-commerce. I'm passionate about it. And to anybody who's tuning in, who's maybe on the fence, my advice is just do it.
Awesome. Famous last words. Appreciate it very much. Guys, always like, share, comment, engage, ask questions. Even if they're snide, we don't care. It'll help us beat big tech. Share this with somebody who needs to learn how to make their first million or is going after their next million, because there's definitely some information in here you guys want to unpack. Thanks so much for coming on with me, David, and sharing a good word, brother.
Hey, thanks so much, Neil. I appreciate it.